75 people in, and almost 60 of you have taken the poll so far, so thanks for that. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. I'm really excited to see that just about a third of you have never used the MTSRN before, so we're excited that this is a good opportunity for you to get to know a little bit more about what the MTSRN is. And if you have used it or played around a little bit, hopefully this webinar will give you the motivation to get in and use it more frequently or answer some questions that have been lingering through your use. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We have a combination of PowerPoint and demo that we want to make available for you. We're going to give you a little preview of what our session is going to look like for today. If I can get my slides to advance. So we want to start off by introducing you to our panel. And then we're going to introduce you to the MTSRN for those of you specifically who aren't familiar with it, give you an overview of the resources that are available on our websites. And then we're going to turn things over to our friends at Frontier Precision, who are going to give more of an overview of what it looks like to start using the network, including logging in, how to create your survey style, understanding mount points, and some troubleshooting. And then we're going to provide some information about how you can become subscribers to the MTSRN. We do have some time built in for Q&A. I want to emphasize that this is really not designed to be a hands-on training necessarily, but we do want to address as many of your questions as we can and point you to resources that we have available that we think will help address many of the questions that we've heard from you. I also want to thank those of you who participated in the questionnaire that we sent out to attendees. That was really helpful for us to get a sense of how many of you have used the system before, how many are brand new to it, and what kind of questions that you have so that we can make the most of this webinar time with you. I'm going to start with introductions. My name is Jennie Stapp, and I'm the Montana State Librarian. I'm a Montana native, and I've worked here at the Montana State Library since 2005, and in my role as State Librarian since 2012. One of the roles that I play as State Librarian is serving as chair of the Montana Geospatial Information Advisory Council, and so I'm very involved in that work. We're also joined by Evan Hammer. Evan has a master's in geography from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He was the first GIS coordinator for the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation, and then we hired him away in about 2008 or 9 as our NRES manager, and he now serves as our digital library administrator. And then Kazi Arifuzzaman has been on staff here at the State Library for a couple of years now. We hired him when we were still piloting the Montana State Reference Network with the state of Washington. I dare to say that I suspect the Montana Network is one of the few networks that actually has a PhD geodesist as its operator. And so we're just really, really fortunate to have Kazi and all of his deep knowledge in supporting the users of the MTSRN. And then we're excited to be joined by a couple of our partners from Frontier Precision, Mel Philbrook and Kyle Engel. They both bring many, many years of experience in helping to bring a variety of geospatial solutions to surveying and civil engineering and GIS practices. And we're grateful that they're giving their time today to help provide a more comprehensive overview of what it looks like to use the Montana State Reference Network. So just at a really high level, thinking about what the Montana State Reference Network is, really it's a set of continually operating reference stations that consist of permanently located global navigation satellite system stations that generate real-time, high-accuracy positions. This is a state-owned network. It's owned by the state of Montana, the Montana State Library is a state agency under the governor's office in the executive branch. We have partnered with Montana tribes, the Montana Department of Transportation, Montana counties, educational institutions, and other private entities to support the stations and bring the network to you. As a state agency, we are working to recover the costs of operation of the network. However, we're not looking to make any money on it. So when we talk about how to subscribe to the network a little later in the webinar, know that the cost involved is really just covering the general cost of operations. And we work hard to try to keep those costs as low as possible. So why the state library? You might not be familiar with the Montana State Library, and it might seem odd to you if you're not aware of the sort of 21st century library services the state library provides, to think about a library hosting the Montana State Reference Network. But there's a variety of reasons why our partners approached the state library and asked us if we wouldn't be the host for the network. As a library, we are a neutral, non-regulatory state agency whose mission and purpose is to provide access to high-quality information resources. And we're also responsible for providing GIS coordination for the state of Montana, including statewide GIS data sets. So one of the reasons we were really excited to be involved in this partnership is that we see the benefit of using the network to help improve the overall geospatial accuracy of those GIS data sets. And then we have a strong commitment to supporting our partners and our end users. That's core to the mission of the state library, and it's really one of the reasons why those partners, MDT, the tribes, and others, reached out to the state library and asked us for our support in supporting the network. And the last point I'll make about our role is that we do maintain a geospatial archive. And so we have the ability to archive a lot of the data that comes out of the Montana State Reference Network and make that information available to people in the future as that geospatial landscape changes over time. So that's a high-level look at sort of who we are at the State Library. I'm going to turn things over to Evan, who's going to take a little bit deeper dive into some of the web resources we have available to you.
Thanks, Jenny. Good morning, everyone. As Jay mentioned, I'm the Digital Library Administrator here at the State Library, and have a pretty deep background in GIS, but I'm not a surveyor. I have worked with GPS pretty much throughout my career and even taught some GPS classes in the early days. But I just want to mention that, we really are excited, as Jenny said, to have a geodesist here to operate the state network. And we also lean heavily on MDT and their surveying resources, as well as a couple of partners, in particular, Wally Gladstone and Dan Staley, who have really done an enormous amount to make the Montana State Reference Network a reality. So just want to acknowledge that and make sure you understand that all of you as land surveyors know that we do value the feedback and input from the surveying community. Want to talk about a few of the resources. As Jenny said, we want to not go through and teach you every aspect of the network, but we want you to be aware of the resources where you can go in and learn more. There's so much here. Want you to be able to focus on the things that are of most value or most importance to you. So the first thing I'll mention is you may find it a little confusing, but there are two websites associated with the Montana State Reference Network. One is our state library page, msl.mt.gov/MTSRN, and that's a little more focused on promoting the MTSRN and getting users registered. And then the MTSRN.org site is much more technical, has technical resources for you when you're planning to do field work or when you're actually out in the field. You can find some good information there. And also want to encourage you to subscribe to our email updates to get the latest information. I don't know if I can turn the page here. Jenny, can you advance the slide?
I can.
Thank you. This is that Montana State Library page, msl.mt.gov/MTSRN. And what I really just want to focus on this page, on the right-hand side, about midway down, We have the standards and technical details for the network and the FAQs. Apologies, I made the screenshot a day or two ago. We have also since added a copy of or a link to the printable network map, which I'll talk about in a minute. So those are a few key items, and then also notice that at the bottom of the page where it says email updates, you can sign up to get email updates through GovDelivery. So as we push network information out, you'll get that. And next slide. Starting up in the upper left-hand corner, this is the web interface that a user has to the Pivot software. Pivot is what the network is being run on. Certainly characterize this page as much more technical. As I said, I don't have time to dig into all the resources, although once we get through the prepared material and go through the Q&A session, if we've got a little bit of time left, we may try pulling up this page and clicking through a few things so you can see this, how it actually works. But I just wanted to emphasize the tools that are available on this site, including as you move a little bit towards the middle, top middle, you can see position scatter plots for all the stations, right? You know, you're looking at just one here, but you can switch that and take a look at station, obviously not station movement, but error over time. There's an online post-processing service up in the upper right-hand corner. We're not going to get into the details of post-processing here. We're really focused on real-time use in this webinar, but do know that that is an option as well. Then there is space weather, ionospheric data, also available to you. So if you're planning a critical mission and you hear that there's going to be some bad solar flares, for example, this is a place where you can come and kind of monitor that activity when you're in your planning phases. And then finally, even if you're not logged into the site, you can come to this page, and the very first link is for the sensor map, and you'll get that sensor map that you see in the lower right-hand corner. Right off, you can see if there are any issues with any of the stations across the network. So you can see a couple of reds over there in the lower right-hand corner. But you can also click on any station here. It's going to give you access to the station. I believe it's the data log. Kazi might have to correct me on the term there, but you can get access to that information through this sensor map. You can also get the lat longs for each individual station under the info link on that sensor map when you click on any individual station. Of course, when you log in, you'll get more access to more of the features on this site. And then there are also going to be options for you to customize your experience on this page. Next link. Something I really wanted to emphasize on this page, you can see if you click to log into this site, you'll get a dialog box that asks for an organization and then your username and password. This information will all be supplied. You can see an example to the right of the emails that Kazi sends out when you join the network. The really important thing I want to tell you is you would only fill the organization box out if you've been provided as organization info. So that's not your business, or that's not what you would put in there. If there's something you can see on the right under the login and password, in this case, Kazi's provided that the organization is trial. So if there's an organization provided there, input that. If there's not an organization, just leave that section blank and put in your username and password. Next slide, please. All right. The last link from the Pivot, from the web interface to MTSRN.org site, and also newly added to the MSL site, is the printable network map. This is an extremely important tool for you when you're out in the field, and also when you're planning. So I encourage you to download this, print a few copies of it, put it in your gear bag. have one in your truck. This will change regularly. We're going to get this set up so that whenever we post a new one, we'll send out an alert via Gov Delivery to all of you so that you know a new map is available. And I just want to go over the basics of this map really quickly. You'll notice that the state is divided into really 6 subnets. One of those subnets we don't have enough station density to have the network up and going. So you'll see there is no label in Southeast Montana, but you can see NWMT, NCMT, NEMT, the Northwest, North Central, Northeast Montana, Southwest Montana, and South Central Montana are the subnets. The second thing you'll notice is that the yellow hue, that's filling in those reddish circles, or I'll call them circles, those reddish areas on the map. That represents areas where there's a virtual reference station solution that you should be able to access that as one of the options using the Montana State Reference Network. And those roughly align with those subnet blocks that you can see on the map. Generally, depending on where you are, you'd be choosing one of those subnets. In a few places, we have sufficient overlap that you could choose between a couple of different subnets. Southwest Montana, or in the Bozeman area, for example, you would have access to the Southwest Montana or the South Central Montana. So you can try either and see which is giving you a better solution at any given time. The next thing I want to focus on here is the stations themselves. And I guess I should mention back, the subnet names are going to be important in the later discussion of mount points, as will be the station names. And so those 4-digit codes for the subnets and then for individual stations. So you can see for each individual station, there's a 4-digit station name. This map shows both existing and planned stations that we hope to get online, but before the end of 2025. That is another place where we lean heavily. We are working with partners to add stations throughout the state, but the bulk of these red stations you're seeing are the efforts of the Montana Department of Transportation to grow and expand the network. So we rely heavily on them for that, and they're doing a great job. So those in red are coming. The other colors represent existing stations. The different colors you'll see there indicate which satellite constellations the stations are configured to provide access to. And I'll readily admit that I don't understand all of the details of what the different constellations offer, but my understanding is providing the full set of constellations, that's GPS, GLONASS, Galileo, and Baidu, and QZS, is going to provide the most robust, the best solutions for the network. And our goal is long-term to have all the stations providing the full set of constellations. And we've done great work in recent months of really moving several stations towards that. And you're going to find better and better solutions as we're able to continue to do that. And then the only other thing I'll mention is you'll notice that some of the stations have orange circles on them, indicating that those are not just core stations, but NGS core stations. And so any of those, if you were to click on them back on the sensor map, you'll get the full NGS site log for any of those stations. That is most of what I had. The last thing I just wanted to mention quickly is that we are offering a trial use program. Generally speaking, new users, if you come in and register for use of the MTSRN, you'll automatically get a 30-day trial. We'll set that up as quickly as possible and give you that 30 days to try and use, and then ultimately, we hope, pay for ongoing use of the network. For all of you attending here today, we're going to bump that out a little bit. We're going to give you access, knowing that we've got the holidays coming up. We'll go ahead and set you up with trial use through the end of January, so until January 31st. But you will need to if you're attending and you want that trial access, you'll need to get on and register for the network. And you can do that through that msl.mt.gov/MTSRN page that I showed you earlier. One quick logistical note associated with that. Apologies for this. We hadn't planned this at the time we set this date, but unfortunately, Kazi is going to be out of the office for the next 2 days, but he'll be back in next week and ready to help get those trial accounts set up. And I'm going to be out for a couple of weeks as well. So just be aware, if you're coming out of this meeting eager to get going, we're not ignoring you. We're going to get you set up as quickly as possible, but it might be next week before we can help with some of those details. With that, I think I'm going to hand it off to our friends at Frontier Precision.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you, Evan. My name is Kyle Engel. I'm with Frontier Precision here in Montana. Mel came over here a few weeks ago, and we put together some video content that he will be going over and sharing, general questions on it. So logging in with your devices, general connectivity with equipment, also some common troubleshooting. They're broken up in segments. So in between videos or during videos, certainly feel free to put questions in the chat. And while we're transitioning to that next segment in between, we'll go ahead and answer those questions as we see fitting. If a bunch of questions are coming in, we will have a recording of all these questions and be able to reach out to you individually if we start to run out of time there. Also, I noticed the pre-webinar, some of you folks decided to do the questionnaire survey that was put out there. So I think a lot of those questions will get answered during these video segments. And I did notice that some of those questions also were have already been answered in the MTSRN FAQ that Jennie and Evan spoke a little bit on. I'll go ahead and share that in the chat. It's a great FAQ that you can go ahead and download the PDF. And I certainly recommend putting it in all of your guys's equipment. So I'll put that in the chat, and Mel, if you want to go ahead and take over here.
Thanks, Kyle. Hey, Kyle, you're seeing this page here with my mouse?
Yep.
Thanks, everybody, for taking time today. Seems like a big crowd, and we hope to help everybody get a better understanding of how to get your equipment set up. I just want to preface that even though today I'll be using a software interface that we're familiar with, just understand that I've been doing this for many years, that what we're trying to show you with a survey style and a GNSS connection would probably be will be similar to other manufacturers other than what we're showing you today. So in neutrality, I don't typically run a TopCon interface or a like interface or some other third-party GNSS interface, but I will tell you that I've been exposed enough to know that those receivers will have a way to connect to a network with credentials and then a survey style that'll drive how and what you see. I'm just happy to show you, I'll be showing you here today how we do it, and it'll probably still help you with your particular hardware manufacturer. I would also say that we would encourage you to reach out to your specific niche manufacturer if what you saw today, you are having any difficulties, please reach out to us and then we'll be able to help you. So I'm going to role play here today that I'm a new user and I want to connect to this network. And how I would want to do that is, like Evan mentioned, you've been provided some great resources. There's two ways you can do this. On the Montana Gov site, there is a live sensor map. So I'm just going to right click here and hit open in a new tab. And then that was allowed me to see a sensor map. in today's role playing, I'm going to be working here in Bozeman with Kyle. And one reason why I opened up that sensor map, I can tell today, because that icon's green, that reference station is in good condition and operating correctly. In the FAQ, it'll go over that icon could be yellow, and that might be an alert to you to be caution, use it with caution. And if it was red, that would mean it's offline, and that could be due to comms or other reasons. Now, from both this site, that was the original state-facing Montana State Library facing site, there was also this printable network map. And then over on this site, you notice there is also a printable network map. So I'm going to now right-click on either one of those and open up that in a new tab. And then now I see this map, and that map is going to allow me some knowledge of the way the networks run. So we know that we're going to be operating right here at in Bozeman, and the station right in Bozeman is called MTSU. And so that's going to matter if we are trying to connect to that station via single base, okay? And then the power of a VRS is that and that's the preferred way to connect, and we'll show you that in the VRS scenario, we still are working in this sector right here, which is Southwest MT, because notice I'm within this georeference barrier here. Let's just call it that way. Now, of course, we are close to a borderline, so that you, and we'll talk about this, that maybe you could be confused and say you want to use SCMT. And we'll address this as we build our connections here. But in this map, you can see that really MTSU is right there, and that is a reference station. And there's also a VRS that covers the this region that's now called SWMT. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to minimize this and go into my software, okay? So in most softwares, you have to tell the requirement for this to work is that you need to have an internet connection. So your software device, your data collector, would need to have some type of cellular connection. That could be provided with an internal SIM card. It can be provided sometimes by people hotspotting phones, or hotspotting a MiFi from Verizon or AT&T or something like that. That's going to provide this device with internet. Now, I'm running an emulator all the way here from Seattle today, but in simulating a position you can see in Bozeman. But this is still going to work. And then our videos were produced while we were on the ground in Montana. And so understand one of the first requirements is that, yes, your device has to have an internet connectivity to be able to get data that's coming from this VRS network. The second thing is, obviously we got to be tracking satellites, and you have to be in the region that you're operating. What I mean by that, these networks are geofenced. And so if I was trying to really do this demonstration from Seattle today, I would not probably be able to get connections because of it's geofenced, okay? Now, in order to, the second thing that we need to do is build a GNSS contact, or some way that we're going to log in with our credentials that have been provided to you by the Montana State Library. And so I'm going to go over to the software and go to a menu, settings, and in our software, we happen to call it connections. And your software will have something similar. And you can see I've already built one here, and I've even have one built for other networks, okay? And then so how are these built? I could take that one and copy it, but we'll go ahead and build it fresh from new by just hitting new here. So when I hit new, you have to give it a name. And I would encourage you, like other network providers have encouraged people, to name that how that connection on how you're intending to connect, maybe VRS or maybe single base. So in here, I'm just going to call this MTSRN, and then I'm just going to call it VRS for now, right? We're an internet rover, so that's what you're going to be using this as. And if the software for Ntrip happen to be turned off, and that's you'll need to slide that on. And that stands for Network Transport of RTCM over IP. And it's a standard. And that standard is for across many manufacturers in the industry. We'll show you this live here, but this is called connect directly to a mount point. And I could connect directly to a mount point. But when you're first operating, you won't know those mount points. And so I'm going to show you how to find those mount points, and then you could write the name down, and then they are case sensitive, and that way you could plug it in here later, but we're not going to do that right now. And so this can make it easy for some operators, so that way you don't make a mistake, happen to choose a wrong mount point, and that's why some people prefer to mount directly. The Ntrip name will be provided by the network provider, which is, Kazi's team, and at the Montana State Library. In my case, I'll bring up just bringing up my credentials, and then we're going to punch them in here, okay? And so that's my username that was provided to us. And then the password is going to be, again, both these are case sensitive. So I'm typing in the correct password. And then you could look at that password to verify spelling. And then now it's important to actually punch in the correct IP address. And I can assure you from years of doing this, we want to make sure we double check and dot our I's and cross our T's here, because all it takes is one digit off on the username, the password, and the IP port, and things won't work, okay? The Montana State Library is using the international port 2101, which is usually for Ntrip. And so just understand that the port will always be 2101, at least for now. So I built this GNSS contact with a name, turned on Ntrip if it wasn't turned on, plugged in my username, my password, the correct IP, and the port. And then you don't have to turn on any of this information down here. So I'm just going to hit enter and store that connection. So now you see I've built one called MTSRN VRS. So now I'm going to escape out of this, and you would go to your software stuff, and then different softwares call it like a receiver style. We happen to call it a survey style. And again, that's under menu, settings, survey style. And in this survey style, you could take one of your existing RTK survey styles and copy that, and then make edits to be able to use it cellularly or over the internet. So for our purpose, that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to just copy a survey style that I know was working previously, maybe for radio. So that means all my other settings are correct, but I just now need to make a couple tweaks so it'll work with the Montana real-time network. So I'm going to hit copy here. When you hit copy, you're asked to give it a name, and I'm going to give that name a very good name too. So I know that I'm going to be doing RTK or using this as a rover for the Montana State Network. And in this case, I'm going to use this as a VRS versus single base because we're going to cover both. And so I'm going to call this MTSRN and then underscore VRS rover. And so I know that in this survey style, I've built and made all the changes so it'll act as a VRS rover versus a single base rover. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. The reason why we're going to cover VRS is that in most networks, whatever state you're using, whether it's Minnesota or Washington or Utah or here in Montana, in a VRS scenario, an operator would prefer to use it that way a majority of the time. It's the easiest way, the safest way to get good, reliable positions. And that's just keeping it simple. So that's what we're going to do here. So I'm going to hit enter and accept. And so now I've made a survey style that's called MTSRN underscore VRS rover. And now I'm going to edit that survey style so it'll work properly. All right. So a couple gotchas, at least from Trimble operators, is that under the rover options, they leave the broadcast format set up for CMRX. And if you do that, then this survey style is really only looking for single bases. It's not looking for VRSs because the broadcast format dictates to the software on how to look at mounts. And you'll see this make more sense as I go hot here. So if you hit the down arrow, if you're another manufacturer, you probably have a broadcast format set up as RTCM, RTK. And again, if you chose that, it would dictate that you only see mounts a certain way also. So just remember that the broadcast format on most manufacturers is dictating how you see your mounts. So we know that we want to use this as a VRS rover. And so I want to then choose to use the correct broadcast format that I'm receiving as my rover. That would be either VRS RTCM if I'm on another manufacturer, or VRS CMR, which is CMRX if I'm a Trimble operator. Or by the way, if you're a Trimble operator and you're working within a network and they only are providing VRS, but RTCM, because that way it works for everybody, a Trimble receiver can choose to use VRS RTCM. However, I know that this network actually has mounts for both VRS RTCM and VRS CMR. And so I'm going to choose, because it's a Trimble receiver, to use VRS CMR. In today's demonstration, I'm using an R12 in my emulator. You would have to make sure you choose the right receiver. And we know our rod is running a 2-meter fixed height. And so I'm going to plug that in. We also know that the rover can only get the information that the base has. One of the awesome things about being a newer VRS network is that many of the stations within the Montana real-time network are complete GNSS, which means it supports Galileo, Beidou, QZSS, and GLONASS. There's only, I believe, 5 stations, and we can get go into the weeds afterwards, that are not, and then and we can look at why and when you might want to turn one of these off. But if you have them all turned on your rover, you're only going to receive what you're getting from the base anyways. So it's not really a big deal to have this turned on if your receiver supports multi-constellation. So I'm going to leave everything turned on here, okay? So I'm going to go to accept. And now the final change, because this was a working survey style, is I have to go to the rover data link that was traditionally set for UHF radio. Now, this one has been changed to say internet connection, but if it did say internal radio, you would want to change it to say internet connection and then choose that connection. So in this case, if I hit the right arrow here, I've made this style for VRS, and then I'm going to accept that. And if you are a surveyor that happens to work in multiple states, like Washington, Minnesota, Utah, etc., you could actually, remember, had built other connections. And so then, therefore, you might want to prompt so you don't actually have to have a survey style that actually specifically states MTSRN. It just says VRS rover, and you'll get prompted every single time to choose which one you want. In this case, we know we're only demonstrating for MTSRN, so I'm not going to prompt. Now, the GNS internet source is how my rover is getting that internet or that correction service from the MTSRN. And 90% of the time, it'll always be controller internet. And so there's no need to prompt again for that. But you could prompt if you were switching for some reason. And the other choices here are receiver modem, receiver Wi-Fi, cable. But really, most operators out there, they're using hotspots, internal SIMs, or a hotspot to a phone. So the controller is actually getting internet from that device, or from internally. So that's what we're going to choose. Some of your receivers, you would put SIM cards in them, and then you would choose this mode here. Just in case you don't see it, that mode there. So I'm not going to prompt for anything because I just want it to go to there and use the internet. And now I'm going to store that. So now we built a survey style and we built a GNSS contact, and how would you work in the real world? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my rover to, let's just say here in Bozeman. And so I'm operating over in Bozeman. And if I wanted to start surveying in a Trimble interface, you could hit measure and then choose your style that way. We're trying to get all our keystrokes down in sub three clicks. You can also go old school to menu, measure, and then choose the survey style there and measure points that way. Okay. So 4 keystrokes that way, or just 1, 2, and we're working here. This radio is going to go away. It's going to get a globe. The globe spinning will say that it's getting internet. And now, because my survey style was set for VRS, you notice that my mounts are only VRS. And then to slow down here, remember, we were operating in the Southwest MT. So we are going to choose that Southwest CMRX right here, which is full constellation, and hit accept. It will get and open the connection. If you ever see a globe with a red X, that means you do not have the internet. So sometimes people's hotspots or their phone is hotspotted and they're actually on their phone, and voice has priority over data. And so they actually lose their data connection while they're on their phone, and they don't realize that. So no different than radio has latency, so does cellular have latency. So Here my globe is spinning and it has a green check, which is great. And I've got hot, or I've got fixed, or I've initialized in different languages for different software manufacturers. And it's telling me I'm good. I would tell people that no different than with a radio, with latency affects your precisions. The whole premise of a real-time network is that you are getting cellular connectivity. And so if your cellular connectivity is weak, if you click here, you would see reliability, information coming in, and latency. Now I'm on a broadband connection here because I'm running an emulator, but I would encourage you that if you're using your hotspot or using an internal SIM, to be paying attention to your latency here. On a cellular connectivity, it should be usually sub 5 seconds and bouncing around within there. And that's, that's, just don't take it for granted that just because that globe is spinning, that there might not be any latency if you're seeing your precisions become not what you're accustomed to seeing, okay? So that was a quick run through on how to build a survey style, how to build a GNSS contact, and how to get hot surveying using a VRS connection. Now let's change gears and role play that for some reason you have a requirement to not use a VRS, but to use a single base. So, and one more thing about that VRS connection that I didn't cover that I need to, and I apologize. So what I'm going to do here real fast is go to measure and end my survey. And I'm going to go back to my survey style. And I failed to mention an important part here that I need to cover down on the rover options. So in a VRS scenario, some people say, hey, when I was using that VRS, I don't get the traditional vectors that I get from RTK, UHF, or from other types of networks. Just remember, in the survey style, you have a decision to make. Do I want to store the position as positions, or do I want vectors? And we would encourage you to change that to vectors, and that was an oversight on my part just a minute ago. So I want to make sure that you realize that's all controlled under the rover options, okay? And then I would hit accept and then store. Now, what we're going to do is change gears and simulate, and I'm going to show you on a map here, that in a VRS, or why I would use VRS, if I was operating, let's just say somewhere up in this area here, okay? I know that I'm not close enough to a single base, but I am within the network and I have cellular, let's just say. But remember, we have a station right in Bozeman. And for some reason, one of your questions on the pre-survey was, I'm not seeing that repeatability. We would tell you, or we would say to you, first, always try to use the VRS. But then if you said, I'm not happy with those results, and I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to get repeatability, we would ask you to maybe try to use a single base operation, or maybe that's your requirement by your survey manager. So that is what we're going to change gears to now. So by looking at this map, I do know that I'm operating in Bozeman, and I do know that MTSU is that single base. So now I'm going to minimize this and go back to my emulator. And since I built that survey style, I might as well copy that because then I only have to make a couple tweaks. So I'm going to copy that survey style by highlighting it and hitting copy. And now we're going to call this MTSRN and then underscore SB for single base. And that's been put into the FAQs, by the way. So I encourage you to read through that awesome document that was put together by the Montana State Library and taken from advice from other great network operators. And it has some great information in that FAQ. But this name does matter, keeps it simple. And now by looking at it, I know it's for the Montana State Network and using single base. Now, what I'm going to do is take that and hit edit on that survey style. And remember, under rover options, the broadcast format dictates what you're going to see for mounts. So I'm going to roll down and to use a multi-station to get my single base. You could also see single bases by using these survey styles up here, whether it's an RTCM for an RTK operator using a non-Trimble manufacturer, and some other manufacturer other than Trimble, like a Topcon, et cetera. You could be using legacy Trimble gear, maybe CMR Plus, et cetera, or CMRX. But I'm just trying to show you a simpler way here by choosing multi-station CMR or RTCM. So I'm going to choose multi-station RTCM just so you see it can work either way. And then hit accept. And then under my rover data link, my correction source is still the same one. So there's no reason to change that, because remember, we're not mounting directly yet. So I haven't even, there's no need to change anything. So I might as well just use the same one I've created. I'm going to store that now. So now when I hit measure and choose the SB mount, you're going to see RTCM flavors come up here, because I told it to look for single base RTCM. See? Now, you can sort up here by mount points. And so we know that we're clear down here at MTSU. And you can see that under MTSU, I have RTCM 3.1 and an MSM, which is RTCM 3.2. And I could choose that. And then I can hit accept. And sure enough, because I'm within the proximity, sub 10 kilometers, nowadays with maybe some higher end receivers, like Trimble R980s, R12Is, like a GS18s, these higher end receivers, you might be able to push what is recommended in the FAQ, which is 10 kilometers out to maybe 20 kilometers max from a single base and still maintain good precisions. But just understand there is a PPM from all manufacturers, and I encourage you to look at the data sheet of the receiver that you own. And if you see this 1 ppm or 1.5 ppm horizontally and vertically, I'll just keep it simple. Think of it as 1 millimeter per kilometer. And so at 10 kilometers, that's a centimeter. And so the farther you move away from Bozeman, single base, you will start to see your precisions drop. And also space weather will play a heavy impact. And we're going to get into that in a minute here. But understand that I just went and connected to an RTCM connection by changing my survey style, and I'm now coming from a single base here. So if I was to measure 0.1000, whoops, here, and just call it a check shot, and measure,
Observation stored.
If I bail out of here and close this survey out, power down receiver, no, and come back in here into my survey style. And in that survey style, that's called single base. Edit this to go multi-station CMR and hit accept. Now, if I go hot on that survey style, you'll see mount points that are built for CMR. Whether you're a legacy receiver using CMR Plus, which is GPS and GLONASS only, or CMR X, which is full constellation. So again, if I roll back down here to MTSU, I have MTSU CMR Plus, which is for legacy Trimble receivers, which is GPS and GLONASS only, and MTSU CMRX, which is for full constellation modern day receivers and a better correction source. Now, I wanted to show you how to connect directly, remember, to a station based on name, because not all manufacturers have the auto pick ability. What I mean by that, some manufacturers, when you build that survey style, if the network provider has provided a mount that moves with your position as you move through the network, then you can choose that. And as you move, let's just say from Bozeman out to Four Corners, it would then switch to P048. Now, I showed you the I want to call it the old school or traditional way, because it is a reliable and best way to know that I pick that name and I know I'm hitting MTSU. And but I also want to show now how you could use single base if you are using our software or Trimble's access. And so I'm going to now show you that right here. There is a mount that's called MTSS. See? MTSS CMRX. And so I told you this was case sensitive. So MTSS _ CMRX, all caps. And I even wrote that down so I will not make a mistake. Now, what I'm going to do is close this out and go back to my settings and go back to my connections. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that survey style, right? And I'm going to copy, that connection style, and I'm going to hit copy. And I'm going to call this MTSRN MSS. So I know that that is a multi-station single point mount. And I'm going to mount directly to that mount name, which is, and that could be either for single base folks or in a VRS, but that way there is no picking and no typo, and you'll see here. So CMRX, and it is case sensitive, and hit enter and store. So the very final way I want to show you here is that you can modify your connection once you know the exact name. And so that way you can find your mounts, and then that way you don't have any human or operator error. So if I come over here to measure, and now I choose single base, right? Because I'm in single basing, but I am going to use this MTSS mount. it's going to prompt, right? Because I didn't change my survey style. So you'll have to change your survey style too. So understand 2 things need to be changed. If you want to mount directly, build it into your GNSS connection, and then also then build it in your survey style, which is right here under single base and under rover data link. Choose the right one here, which is now that one. Hit accept, and now store. And so now I've told that style to do single base, and I've also told that style to use the mount, which already picks the mount for me. So now if I come in here and measure and use single base, there'll be no prompt. It will hit the mount. It knows where I'm located at automatically. See? And everything's operating dynamically here. If I was to zoom out, and then Kyle and I have tested this. As you move through Montana with Trimble software, it will actually auto pick the closest station. So with that said, what I'm going to do is minimize this. We built some videos that that we'll be sharing with some Audible. This video here, if you're seeing this video, Kyle, is still seeing this?
Yeah, I still see it. I guess right before rolling into that, I hadn't really seen many questions come through on the chat. There was one asking best way to improve cellular latency, but at that point, I don't know if you have anything more to add, Mel, but
Yep.
I think just not using a cell phone, but actually getting a dedicated.
Yeah, I think so. That was from Robert Bain or something like that. You can reach into us afterwards. There are devices that we can work with you that can take. Well, so the question was, hey, I want to use the Montana real-time network, but I know I'm operating right on the cusp of cellular.
Not that one, Mel. I just responded to that one directly, but Grady had asked what's the best way to improve cellular latency.
Yeah.
And so at that point, yeah, I guess Grady, if you're using your cell phone, I would say maybe look into a more dedicated,
yes,
like a MiFi device
or internal SIM. Folks, just understand this: MiFi devices are dedicated data, and that's all they do. And I've been doing this for years, and I've seen hotspots where they have higher, the data is more reliable than my phone on doing any data. And the other negative thing about using or hotspotting phones is that these devices were designed primarily for voice and data secondary. And as you're talking or getting impacted on your phone, that takes away maybe data that you think you're getting, which is impacting that latency that I showed you. And then one last thing, most manufacturers can show RTCM age limit. So if you ever have questions on those vectors, I know that in Trimble Business Center, we can show RTCM latency in our vector spreadsheet. It's just turned off. Know that can be turned on, and that way you can see latency, because we've been asked these questions in different networks. When we look at that job file and look at the latency, they weren't aware they were getting like 10, 15, 20, 30 seconds latency when using that respective VRS, and it has nothing to do with the VRS not operating. It has everything to do with your rover getting consistent second by second corrections from the network. Hopefully that helps. Let me just roll through this real fast. This video is just showing you live in Montana, what I've showed. And you'll see it then operate more traditionally how a true rover would operate. Building a name here, right? Choosing internet rover, making sure that I choose in-trip yes if it was turned off. Once again, then double checking your in-trip username and password, because that username and password is case sensitive. And if it's not typed in right through any manufacturer, it will cause failure. And then when we're done here, I'm going to show you one more powerful tool that we use as support personnel, but we also encourage end users to use this to verify your credentials and the network's working, and that's called Lefebvre in-trip client. But I'll show you that here in just a second. But here you see we punched in the name and the password. Can't stress that it is case sensitive, and make sure you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's here. That the IP address is correct. The port is 2101. And then we're just going to double check everything and hit enter. So once we do that, we're going to take that, modify that into a survey style. Again, that's all the way down in settings and then survey styles. I would encourage you always take a survey style that you already were working with, because you know that's working, or you can hit new and then give it a good logical name. I would stick, we call this VRS rover, but I would stick with the MTSRN_SB or NTSRN_VRS rover. It's just that way you know it's for that particular network. Under rover options, again, your broadcast format dictates everything. And so we're going to change that to be what we say we want. I would, again, stress for 90% of the folks out here, you would just use VRS RTCM or VRS CMR. It just works. Your base is virtualized, or it mitigates the PPM error within the network. That's awesome. RTCM, again, for manufacturers that are not Trimble, and then CMR for Trimble folks. However, if you saw that a Trimble receiver can use RTCM. Under here, the radio, because this is not an emulator, you notice I had to switch it to internet connection, and that's how it was done. And then you choose your connection that you built. Then you hit accept once you choose it. And then once you have built a proper survey style with the broadcast format, and you've chosen the correct GNSS correction source, and you've chosen the correct GNS internet source, which is usually internal, what we call controller internal. And you'll see me choose that here by hitting the right arrow under GNS internet to controller internet. Again, you're 90%, 99% of the time is going to be controller internet, or you'll choose receiver internet modem if you stick the SIM card directly into the receiver. While we're talking about that, understand that most SIM cards will not work on any legacy receiver, because all these network providers have gone to 4G, 5G cards only. You can see here that I'm now going to hit measure and choose that style. And then it shows the GNSS corrections, and then go hot. Pay attention that up here, the globe will start spinning. A lot of people think they pair it up with their MiFi. You can sort on distance also, understand that. For those who said it wasn't working, it is now working, so understand that that is now working. That was one of the pre-questionnaires. Now that I'm opening the connection, see the globe is red X. You will see it spin and get a green X checkbox. That means it's good. It's got internet coming in. So again, if that globe had a red X, double check your hotspot or your MiFi, your internal SIM, and you can see we're hot here right outside our office, and you can see that I'm hitting MTSU there because I chose single base here, right? And then the PRS, like the FAQ mentioned, contrary to what people, there is a pseudo-random station that was generated from MTSU. I'm going to now simulate going VRS. And again, that's based on the broadcast format. So you would have to edit your survey style or create a new one. And I would encourage you not editing your survey style like I'm doing here. We're professionals and we do this all the time. I keep it simple. Build the survey style, name it for single base, name it for VRS, and that way no one's editing them and making mistakes. You see, I chose the broadcast format for VRS CMR, and then therefore my mounts will be VRS CMR. So once I choose my style and I hit next and hit accept, because I told it to prompt, by the way, here. If you don't tell it to prompt, it just goes right in and builds the mounts, and you only see the regional mounts like we showed for Southwest, South Central, Northwest, North, etc. And we know that we are in the Southwest. And so by choosing Southwest and going hot, by hitting accept, I will connect to the network, see the globe is red X, and then it starts to spin, which means it's getting internet. Then once it gets internet, it will say waiting for information from the base, and you're hot. So that sums up what we wanted to show you today or this morning, and now we're open to answer any questions. I can't stress how important this map is, and like Evan and Kazi mentioned, this map is going to be fluid and dynamic, which means you're going to see, for example, this area isn't built out yet, and when it gets built out, you'll see that show up on this dynamic map. These once again, I'd like to say one of the awesome things about being involved with the Montana State Reference Network is that this network was recently built. So you can see based on the nomenclature or the legend that many stations are full GNSS, which is really awesome moving forward. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that answers some of the pre-questions is that space weather, and we're moving into high solar storms. And that's where ionospheric and tropospheric conditions impact you as an RTK operator. So we're not here to get in the weeds today, but I am saying that is why a VRS is valuable versus single base, because when you use single base, it can impact that you as a network operator and there's a great app called Space Weather that we've done tech talks on or webinars on that I would highly encourage you to look at. And then also, as a user signed up for this, right here under I-95 ionosphere, you have the ability to see when this this gradient is clear up here at high activity, that would impact you as a network operator or an RTK user. And that's available right there on this site. I use space weather all the time on my phone. I would encourage you guys to it's called Space Weather Live. It's available on Android and iOS. And more so because we are moving up towards high activity in 2025. And then it doesn't just end in 2025. So lots of people have written great articles about this, talked about this. And just because, you know, some manufacturers have things like IonoGuard, et cetera, does not mean that you as an operator should not be aware of how space weather impacts you in the performance of your measurement. So let's look at some of these questions here.
Yeah, if you came in directly to the Montana State Library, if you guys want to jump on those there, starting with that downloadable KMZ.
I want to mention really quick, I know we want to do the Q&A here, but apologies. Looks like we're a little glitchy on the chat where some people are trying to answer some of the questions and not having access to all. We're working a little bit without our administrative assistant today, and so we're learning some of the details here. So we'll try to work through and get to all these. And I also just want to acknowledge, I noticed that Gavin Schrock has joined us. Gavin is a real pioneer in the world of RTN network operation, and has done an enormous amount to help make the MTSRN reality. So I want to thank him and really appreciate him joining us today. If you like the MTSRN and you ever run into Gavin, thank him for helping us make this a thing here in Montana.
For sure. Everything I know is because of smart guys like Gavin, who I've been blessed to have a professional relationship with, and Gavin would tell you that I pinged him and other network operators before our launch here today. They've been running successful networks for many years, and in that chat, Gavin even had a great. You know, he's like myself, geeks out on technology, but says, you know, these little external antenna jacks are a great idea for MiFis, you know, to get an antenna booster. There are other devices out there that can boost also, but the main point is cellular latency is a real thing, and so don't assume you just have connectivity, because that's we know as support, you know, professional support people here, that when we look at data, RTCM age limit is a real thing, and we can show that to you. And so understand that the network and the bases are operating when they're green and they're providing really good data. If you're not getting it on your rover, it's based on your rover connectivity, that cellular piece that's not traditionally looked at.
I know there's at least one. There might have been a few questions about a KMZ file with all the stations on the network. We have and use that internally. I don't know that we've ever posted it for users to use, but I can't see of any reason why we shouldn't do that. So we'll look into getting that available. I think some of you might find that to be a really good resource, and so we'll work on getting that out there to you.
Yeah, Evan, we do a lot of planning for GPC targets using Google Earth on the phone. And the cool thing about dropping that KMZ on Google Earth, then you're kind of using your phone to see where your position is, and then you see the GCP targets. So I could see how having a KMZ map of all the stations then you would just have it right there and know, hey, this is where I'm geolocated at, and I'm the closest station to me is boom. Yep. So that'd be pretty slick. That was from Brian, I think, or something. Yep.
Sounds right. I'm just scrolling through the chat real quick. I think there's also something in the Q&A if somebody else wants to check there.
Yeah, and also as you guys come up with some questions, feel free to do the raise hand thing, and we can allow you to ask your question.
Yeah.
And there's a question on, can you work just outside the network?
Soon as you roll outside the network, you're now at that ppm single base, is how we traditionally teach that. So yes, you can work outside the network, but know that now outside the network, you are now moving into that whatever manufacturer, 1.5 ppm per kilometer. And so, I'm just role playing here at 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, 30 kilometers, you'll start to see position degradation. And then the bad thing about working outside of a network is remember that space weather and all of that's going to play havoc on you. So that is oh, and I'm sorry, Evan, maybe I forgot to show them that in Lefebvre thing. Should we show that? Yep. Am I still sharing that screen or no?
Right now we're seeing your camera.
Yeah. So for that question about outside the network, we should talk about that. And so I'm going to show my screen here. And I'm launching a tool that we use that's called Lefebvre Intro Client. And so what I'm going to do here real fast is just role play by bringing up Google Map and roll over to Montana here. All right. And if you were operating, I'm just role playing here, out of here in Powderville, for example, right? And I get a position there at 4563 105. I could come into my Lefebvre app here. And so I'm trying to show you a couple of reasons why you use this application. When people call in and say, hey, I'm trying to get on the WSRN, or I'm trying to get on the turn, or I'm trying to get on the MTSRN, and it's not working. The fastest way I verify if things are working is I use my Lefebvre entry client, and under edit here, I'm going to plug in that I'm using Ntrip. And then remember, I got to plug in that address 3.23.213.134. It's on 2101. I've got to plug in the username. And then I've got to plug in the password. And then I've got to plug in that position because I'm actually mocking my position. So why that's important in any network, if I geolocate myself there and drop a pin, if I don't get hot here with my emulator, that means I'm out of the network. So I'm going to prove that real fast by actually using a position here out clear here in Wyoming, okay? So I'll pick that position at 44 minus 105. So if I plug in 4452 and then minus 105.16, and I know I'm outside the network here, right? If I come in here and hit download a source table, it pulled a source table from my credentials. See? Now, for kicks, I'm going to try to pull in from SCMT because that's the closest network, right? SCMT. So if I came up here to SCMT I didn't see it up top there. SCMT VRS right there. And try to get hot. Well, usually it wouldn't go hot that far, right? It's because it's geofenced. So we'll look into that. But that when they're the network's kind of geofenced, and so it would know that you're outside the network, all right? But the main reason why I'm showing you this is that obviously I could pick that I'm having issues, remember, in Bozeman. So back here to get my bearings here, sorry. I'm over here in Bozeman. I can drop a pin where I'm operating at, which is 45,111, and you can plug in that value, right, at 45,65, and then 111,008. And again, build my mounts, download the source table based on that. And then now I can check and see is, Southwest CMR working, RTCM working, or, MTSU, just find your mount. So, and hit it, right? So if I came down here to, I got to find the MTSU CMRS right there and connect. I am verified, my credentials are working. I verified that MTSU is working. So I know there must be a problem on my survey style and my connection. Does that make sense? Hopefully that was very helpful. This is freeware. You would just Google N-Trip client. And the first hit usually is that lefebvre.com right there, okay? Hopefully that was very helpful. All right.
Someone asked if that's available for iOS or if there's if not.
No, I've only found it available for Windows. Maybe Gavin knows something that that works on Android or iOS devices.
Gavin did put something in there for iOS.
Okay.
It's called N-Trip Checker.
Okay.
Thanks, Gavin. Yep.
Yeah, and this tool also, the Lefebvre also works on Android. I've got that on my phone. And to your point, Mel, all you guys out there, if you're calling in for support and you're having difficulties connecting, this is a tool that the operators are often using to do some troubleshooting because it does isolate that. Is this on your device end or is it with your account authentication? Do you have a bad username or a bad password? This is a way we can test it and we know if we can connect through that client. So you can also do that yourself by downloading that tool or connecting to that tool and running those steps. For those of you that might just prefer do it yourself. So just a great tool to have access to. I was just going up and maybe I don't have an answer for this, but I don't know if Mel or Kyle or Kazi might be able to. There's a question, a user, Eric, was saying that his virtual reference station is usually about 25 miles away. That doesn't sound normal to me.
If he's a Trimble operator, have him reach into Kyle or myself, and then
Okay.
it's probably set for the survey styles dictating that he's getting a single base, and because remember it's going to, whether in VRS or whether in single base, it's pulling from a single base, so the PSRN is being picked, but if it was truly set up as VRS, it would be virtualized, but still has a PSRN. So he might be confused that the PSRN is maybe 25 miles away, but the virtual, the vectors would have to look into it. We don't need a.
I took a screenshot of that and have the contact information, so I'll reach out directly.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Also saw a question here about getting a station in the Great Falls area. I know in general that we have good coverage there, even though we don't have one directly in Great Falls. There has been discussion, but I haven't heard anything recently. I don't know, Kazi, if you have any more current info about possibility of a station in Great Falls.
Not currently.
Okay.
We
We
don't have any plan currently to install a station because Great Falls area is pretty much has a good geometry.
Well, I'm such a being involved with networks for a long time, and Gavin would understand this. We're always looking for contributors, and so Kyle and I know of some folks in that region that maybe would want to become a part of the contributor. That might be a great segue, Evan, to lead into that. Do you want to talk about a little bit?
Thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it, Kyle, or Mel, sorry. And I was just thinking along those same lines. I'll just say that I know it's not Great Falls, but recently someone reached out to us from City of Helena about a station they've got that we'd like to get on the network. And it's, to what Mel was saying, we are heavily dependent upon partnerships here to make MTSRN work. We will work with you guys in a variety of ways if you can contribute to the network. And one of the easiest ways to do that, if you have the ability to get a station set up in your area and want to add that to the network and be responsible for that station, we can offer you a subscription to the network in exchange for that. Like I said, that's not the only way that these contributions can work, but it is one. If you can do that and you're interested, please reach out to us. If maybe you can't do that, but you can contribute in other ways, give us a shout. Let's talk about it and see if that's something that would justify providing a subscription in exchange for what you're providing.
Yeah, one last question I see from Kazi to Robert Bain was about the PRS. That's based out of it's a pseudo-random station number that's generated from the Pivot software in this case. Other network providers use, and that's covered in the FAQ. Some people, some manufacturers use this PBS, you might see. Some use PRS, but that is all behind the scenes through the Pivot software. Just understand that is just different manufacturers showing how and displaying where your correction source is coming from in simplicity. And that pseudo-random station number is generated from Pivot. Hopefully that answers that question.
Thanks, Mel. Another one I see is, I don't think we've hit this one, was asking about being able to download their job and see where their VRS was in relation to their project.
Yeah, I think you might have touched on this a little bit with your survey setup, Mel. The user wants to download their job, bring in that solution into Trimble Business Center, and then be able to see the vectors in relation to their project.
Yeah, once again, I'll reshare my screen. It's important if you're not seeing that, then under your settings in your survey style in different manufacturers, your rover, how your rover receiver is set up, just know that if you do not have it set to, if you have it set to store as positions, you will never see vectors when you drag that job into TBC. And then if you switch it to store as vectors, then you'll get to see the vectors coming from the pseudo-random station that was from the VRS solution. Does that make sense?
I noticed in the Q&A, there's a question about Lefebvre and needing to disconnect. I haven't used it in a while, but I do think that's an important point. When you do your connection, I believe my memory is that you're connecting and receiving a lot of data, so you don't want to just leave it leave it forever connected. It'll just accumulate data. So yeah, you connect to do the troubleshooting you need to do, but then disconnect that so that it's not continuing to communicate and pull in data.
Yeah. Hey, Evan,
am I
that might
memory
be a
right on
good,
that?
that might be a very good time that we did not cover this, that
Okay.
remember they are given a login, folks. And one of the pre-questions from the pre-questionnaire was, can I use that one login that we paid for with other and share it, let's just say amongst my organization? It is a one use, one login. Yeah, you could share it as long as one person, the other person is not using that. But what causes people problems and network operators have to deal with this. Are you still seeing my screen here, Evan?
Yes.
If I was hot here measuring, right, and I do not come in here and measure and end my survey, right? Then I'm going to go ahead and power down this time. My connection's being utilized, so that one connection that you have within your company can't be utilized by other people. And sometimes softwares crash, and that means your login is being utilized. And we should maybe address that, Evan or Kazi. Yep, that then it has to be unlocked. It's rare, but just understand that username and password is singular, not multiple.
Yeah, you won't be able to use it concurrently, and basically we can't support anything there. That's beyond our abilities with the software. If you try to use one set of network credentials on multiple devices at the same time, it won't work. And whatever problems may come out of that may be very difficult for us to repair. So if you're transferring it among your devices and using them independently at different times, that's perfectly fine. But the concurrent use is where issues come up. So,
Yes.
so please avoid that situation. We had another question in the Q&A, and it's from Sean Lee. It's about calibration, but I'm not sure. We've talked about a lot of different things, so I'm not sure which your question about calibration was. So if you can provide a little more info there, Sean, that'd be great. Unless one of you guys.
I don't see that one. I'm trying to find it.
No, it's in the Q&A at the bottom. You can click on the bottom tab there. It's not in the
Q&A.
chat.
Yep. Oh, okay. Yep. From Sean Lee. Does there need to be any type of calibration? Do you have any recommendations for that? In short, and it's covered in the FAQ, that always check against your control when using this system. Even though there's been great care to comply with NGS and have great geodetics, only you as an end user know how well you're hitting your respective control. And so to answer the question more neutrally, sometimes people do calibrate and when they're doing that, that would be more typical in a single base scenario, Sean. So you wouldn't traditionally do that with a VRS because that's not the traditional way of doing that. If you were calibrating, it would be that you were within, and again, we could pull this offline, but we would say that if you're sub 10, 20 kilometers of a base and you're needing to get either localize or calibrate depending on your manufacturer's terminology. That's how that's done. We would need to you would need to know that. And again, all of that's kind of covered in the FAQ, because when you start dealing with calibration, you're dealing with grid and ground and all these other things that are geodetics. And that's the network. Montana State Library is just providing real-time corrections that are lat long and height level ellipsoid. They're neither grid nor ground nor in any state plane coordinate system. That is up to your respective manufacturer and software, and knowing how that operates to get to hit what you're trying to achieve. One last question was any idea when we'll be up and running Winifred?
I don't know. I defer to Kazi if he has received any info there.
Oh, and one
other than to say in 2025.
Yep.
Yeah.
One last important one. There was one.
Go ahead, Kazi.
Sorry, Kazi. I'll let you.
Go ahead, Mel.
Well, I saw a very important question. Yes, when you're using Lefebvre and you're logged in, and you stay connected, it's your connection. So yes, that's being used. So you definitely need to disconnect. You were just using that to test your credentials. But if you're connected, that device is the device that's connected. So good question, John Rice. Just know, yep, you do need to disconnect, or you're not going to be able to connect out in the field. Yep. I'm sorry, Kazi, you can go ahead and answer about John Pugh's question about Winifred.
Yeah, so when I spoke to, since MDT is going to install that station, and according to MDT, Winifred is going to be a tough job for them, because probably the shade they are going to reconstruct, and there is no current internet communication system set up over there. So we might give answers to this question, more details, when I speak to MDT again.
Yeah, we can certainly. So the basic message there is that it's targeted to be up in 2025, but there are some challenges with that location. But yeah, we can. I saw that name a second ago. John, we can certainly keep you updated as we get more information about time frame there.
Yeah, and I'm quick to admit if I've used wrong vernacular, because it's easy. Gavin is, he's still on here, and he this term called pseudo-random station. If everybody would read in there, hey, that's really not a valid way of explaining what's going on with that PRS. And again, that was in the FAQ, so I at least cover myself there. But PRS or PBS, right, is really this physical reference station and a message type for either RTCM users or CMRX. And and Gavin he's very exposed to a lot of different people and a lot of different networks. Some other manufacturers use the term PBS, others use PRS, and that's our case. It's really physical reference station. Both mean a tie to a physical station, and that's the importance. And again, that's covered in depthly in the FAQ. I can't encourage it, folks to enough to read it. I read it again last night before today, and I still slipped with using wrong terminology. But the most important thing is understanding how it works, and understanding the questions about site cal, localization, horizontal, vertical, all those things are covered in this very well written document. And like Evan had mentioned, they built this network based on a lot of help from another successful network operator, which was the WSRN, which Gavin has a lot to do with. And so a lot of this information isn't just came up today, or it's years in this document. So we would encourage you to please read this document.
Yeah, that document has certainly been specialized for Montana, but we leaned heavily on the FAQ that Gavin makes available for the WSRN users in developing that. So once again, thank you to Gavin for that help.
I call it NIH syndrome, not invented here, and redoing work that has been done by other people for years. It's better just to copy what's working and replicate it.
I think we've probably gotten through most of the questions that I've seen. So thank you so much for hanging out with us for the better part of a couple of hours. I hope that this was really helpful. I want to just share one more reminder about next steps. You have information now about how to register for the MTSRN if you're not currently a user. You can register either through msl.mt.gov/MTSRN or at mtsrn.org. Like Evan said, for those of you who have attended today, we're offering a trial through the end of January 31st of 2025. Typically, that's a 30-day trial for anyone new to come in and test the system, but with the holidays and winter time, we thought it would be useful for you to have a little bit longer to test the network. In order to then maintain your login, we would need you to pay for your subscriptions by January 31st of 2025. The login cost is $1,500 per login per year, as Evan and Mel talked about. The cost is per login. We don't police the sharing of logins in any way, but a login cannot be used concurrently, and you'll run into issues if you try for that. So we know we have a lot of subscribers who've started with 1 or 2 subscriptions and found for their particular business needs that more is ideal because they have that kind of concurrent use. And so again, the cost is $1,500 per subscription. Just wanted to wrap up by sharing Kazi's contact information there. Like Evan said, he'll be available again starting on Monday. So if you have questions or want to go ahead and subscribe or start a trial subscription, you can reach out to him there. He is also notified directly when you subscribe through the online system. And I just want to say again how much we appreciate Mel and Kyle from Frontier Precision. They've been just a really, really great partner. Evan talked a little bit about contributors to the network, and this really is a partnership for us to grow this network for the state of Montana. And Mel and Kyle have been great contributors to the network as well. So thank you so much for taking the time. It's a little before noon, so if there's any final questions that we can answer in the last couple minutes, we're happy to do so. Otherwise, thank you again so much for your time.
One quick thing that Gavin brought to our attention is there's an FAQ, as I showed you, there's an FAQ link off the MSL page, as well as the FAQ link on the pivot page, mtsrn.org. Those are 2 different items. We will work on streamlining that. The more, much more detail can be found on the mtsrn.org page. That's almost like a booklet of FAQ, much more expansive. I think what we'll probably do is just link to that at the bottom of the MSL page. It may take us a little while to get there, but in case you come to, that one that you just saw and don't see the full set, we'll get a link on there so that you can get to the wider set of FAQ quickly and easily and minimize any confusion. So thanks, everyone.
Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Appreciate everyone attending.
Yep. And thank you, Frontier Precision.
See you this afternoon on the mapping and unmanned site.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. And thanks again, Gavin. Bye-bye.